Ultimately, there's this shift going from retention being this almost reactive approach. When a customer gets lost, try and win them back. When a customer's due for a service, try and get them in. I think there's a shift towards, let's say, preemptive care. How can we get more efficient? How can we provide a better customer experience? And how can I measure my staff to understand what are they doing well, but also what are the areas for improvement?
Welcome to Retention Roadmap, Navigating Service Success for New Car Dealerships. I'm your host, Phil Springer. Today's podcast is sponsored by DriveSure. DriveSure helps new car dealerships remain the go-to provider for maintenance, tires, and repairs. For information on how DriveSure can help your dealership, go to drivesure.com/dealership solutions. My guest today is Michael Johnson, Director of Customer Success for Infomedia, a global leader in service technology and customer lifecycle solutions for OEMs and dealerships. Michael is based in Melbourne, Australia, and brings deep experience in service innovation, including overseeing the launch of service-activated roadside assistance for Jeep in Australia. Today, we're exploring how OEM-led programs, digital service platforms, and smarter use of data help retain more customers, both in Australia and here in the US. Michael, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Bill, for having me. Yeah, it's good to be here. I've had my coffee. It's 9 a.m. here in Melbourne, so I'm ready to go. I'm caffeinated.
Nice. Yeah, we've got a 15-hour time difference, I think it is, between Melbourne and the US.
Yeah, something like that.
All right, Michael. Well, let's just jump right in. Tell us a little bit about your role with Infomedia and what problems Infomedia is helping solve for dealerships and OEM today.
Yeah, so as you said, I look after customer success for APAC. We've got 3 regions: APAC, the Americas, and EMEA. Really, my role in simple terms is customer retention role, making sure that clients, large enterprise, very high touch down to individual dealerships through systems are looked after, understand the products, understand how to maximize the potential of those products, and if they're not using it, help them get to a point where they're using it, and when they are using it, take them from B performance to A performance so that they're really driving a solid ROI and so on. And I think in terms of how Infomedia supports them, we've got a number of different solutions that I think we'll touch on a few of them sort of briefly today, but right through from electronic parts catalogs through to service workshop solutions, right through to data analytics and recently e-commerce and AI as well. So we sort of cover the full spectrum. Yeah.
I think one of the reasons I was excited to have you on a podcast, Michael, is because you've got really a unique background in the sense that you've worked for both OEMs as well as working in the technology, digital technology space, serving OEMs and dealerships, as well as that difference, some of those differences and similarities between markets, between what we see here in the U.S. versus what you see in Australia.
Yeah.
And my limited knowledge about the Australian market is that there seems to be some real innovation going on there, and obviously it's not as large a market as the U.S. and perhaps that gives you some more flexibility in terms of experimenting with different things. But from your perspective, what are you seeing, Michael, as some of the biggest forces kind of shaping service retention in 2025 and 2026, which is coming up quick?
I think you're right in terms of the market, differences and similarities. A lot of people don't know Australia is one of the most competitive markets in terms of the sheer volume of automotive brands. But we've only got a population of 25 million people. But because it's a mature market, a lot of auto brands tend to use Australia almost as a testing ground for different strategic initiatives and different programs. And so, we do have a number of programs that start here and expand across the world from an auto brand perspective, but some that also just stay here and become very Australian specific. But in terms of, I guess, where we're heading with service retention, I think there's sort of a couple of key themes, I suppose. I think one is we're really starting to see that shift from, let's say, traditional service intervals more through to, let's say, service intelligence from a overall retention standpoint. And what I mean by that is the communication's always mirrored, the time or mileage sort of criteria. It's a very reactive process. And, reminders or various marketing's always followed that, let's say quite generic. I think it's increasingly becoming and there's a need for a much smarter approach to it, more robust prediction. So, think predictive maintenance, leveraging connected car data, which is now starting to expand much more across automakers and the globe. I think pattern, forecasting and trying to understand what a customer is going to need before they need it as well, and not just constantly reacting. So, yeah, I think ultimately there's this shift going from retention being this almost reactive approach. When a customer gets lost, try and win them back. When a customer's due for a service, try and get them in. I think there's a shift towards, let's say, preemptive care. That's probably sort of the first one. And the second main one, I think, is convenience. I think convenience has always been, a massive part of why a service customer would choose. But at least from what I can see across the products that we interact with and just even discussions with dealers, there's almost this shift towards that convenience being this almost emotional sort of perceived convenience, right? So it's not the longer hours and mobile servicing and out of hours pickup drop off. They're all kind of not expected now, but so many people are doing them that what's that unique selling point? And I think where customers really notice the benefits and will become retained is that they got clear communication, that there's this genuine feeling of transparency and that they trust the dealer, right? So this emotional convenience that it was easy to go and service there because of the experience as opposed to because it was close to home or because it was close to work. I think, yeah, people are much more connected, let's say, to the feeling that they got within the service.
Interesting. Yeah. You bring up connected vehicle data. Talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of how OEMs as well as the market is kind of trying to leverage that to improve that customer experience, and as you said, to be more predictive and customize that customer experience.
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of automakers that have connected car data and don't necessarily use it. Yeah, so traditionally it's been sort of one of those data points that's almost retained within, a more technical area of the business. Maybe it's to understand potential warranty concerns and address them leveraging data as opposed to waiting for customers to come in and complain. So there's almost this, some automakers have managed to do it, but not all. They've managed to join the dots between that technical side of the business with their more operational and commercial arms. And when it can get in their hands, they're able to leverage that, let's say, very technical data source to leverage it for marketing and revenue growing activity. So like one example would be we've got a product called InfoDrive, and one of the applications within it is that it ingests that connected car data, enriches it with DMS data and other sources to turn, a sensor, ABC 123 sensor going off in a car into a very one-to-one tailored marketing piece that to a customer doesn't really even feel like marketing. Yeah, it's the car telling them that something's needed. It's not someone in a corporate office with a good idea trying to get them to come back, and they're perceived very differently as a result. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious, Michael, from your perspective, this kind of tension that can exist between the OEM and the dealer with respect to customer retention and responsibility for that customer retention, as well as this issue of data. I know in the U.S. at least, there's a lot of tension there about, well, who really owns the data and how does that get used? I'm curious from your perspective, being on both sides of the fence, as to how effectively OEMs and dealerships can work together to really leverage that. If you've got any examples of that, that would be fantastic.
Yeah. It's a great question. I'm actually working with a client at the moment who is facing that challenge at the moment where they're trying to, let's say, earn the trust of their dealer network to, provide a level of data that will allow them to collaborate more and drive retention strategies. But I think if I think back to, maybe my time at Renault might be a good one. So half of my career has kind of been on this side of the fence in software with Infomedia, and the other half of that's been with national sales companies in Australia. And at my time at Renault, we launched what's now the InfoDrive product. So I was a client of Infomedia, but at the time, data was it was an increasing topic. Let's say people were becoming more aware of how important it was, and maybe 20 years ago they'd almost hand it over and not really understand the value of it, but they were starting to cling on to it. And I think the key is that the national sales company really needs to come to it from a view of it's not just me trying to get all of the data from the dealer so that I've got that visibility and transparency and I can execute the programs that I want to execute. It's what's the dealer going to get out of it? What's that dual benefit? And I think if you can nail that from the start and that both parties are going to receive some value from it, then they're going to collaborate better. So as an example, if the dealers are getting a tool that's going to help them grow revenue or be more efficient through that collaboration, then why wouldn't they be a part of it? It's just that most of the time that dealer benefit is almost missed from the communication and the discussion. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Michael, I was hoping we could maybe talk a little bit about the Australian market in particular, and maybe talk about it from a 20,000 foot perspective with respect to retention. What are dealers and OEMs in Australia seeing as kind of the key defection points, if you will, for a
Yeah.
customer, putting them at risk at leaving the dealership service department and going to the aftermarket? What do you see as some of those key points
Yeah.
in the
Okay.
Australian market?
At a high level, I think there's two things. There's one that um, has always existed, which is, the warranty drop off. I'm
Yeah,
sure you've got that in the States as well,
sure.
but the warranty drop off has always been a challenge. It always will be a challenge. I think the difference is that in 2025 and 2026 and beyond, it's becoming a bigger battleground that dealerships and national sales companies are starting to care more about, because those older vehicles, organically the average spend increases and they're missing all of that opportunity. And I think as new powertrains come into it, electric vehicles and so on, and some of that traditional revenue gets lost, they can kind of replace that with the cars that are already out there on the road, only if they can retain them longer. So I think there's that part of it, but also people are just owning their vehicles longer in Australia as well. It's stretched out with recent sort of economic factors and so on. So I think that's a big one. It's a challenge. Brands are all trying different approaches, whether it be proactive campaigns. We've had one do AI outbound phone calls so that it's getting the benefit as if it was a person calling them and having a conversation, but obviously in a way that's much more scalable, certainly cheaper from that perspective. And really just trying to drive that lifetime value, let's say, with the car post warranty. So that's the obvious one. The other strategies that are being put in place are service activated roadside, which I'm sure we can touch on later, but different things to I guess create value, yeah, in later servicing for a customer, where their perceived value as costs of servicing go up
Yeah,
starts to drop off. But the
yeah,
the other one that we've seen step up a bit, and the reason behind this we could maybe speculate on, but it's first service retention. For whatever reason, it's just become harder to get new vehicle owners back for their first service. Whether that's an increasing mix of fleet customers or whether it's maybe they're more commoditized in terms of they're not buying the brand anymore. They're almost buying the vehicle that's got the biggest screen, and maybe there's some of that in there. But we're
yeah.
finding that's a big challenge. Every brand that we work with has seen a little bit of a drop off there, and again, marketing and basically transparency for dealers so that they know which customers aren't coming back, so that they
Yeah.
can take action, have been some key pieces to try and uplift that.
Interesting. Do you know, or can you share with us, Michael, kind of overall what that first service percentage is? Of every 100 new cars that are sold by a dealership, what percentage of them are coming back for that first
Yeah, it,
service
it,
appointment?
it varies. It varies. So we've got
Sure.
we've got brands that are as low as 60 out of that
Okay.
100. Yeah, they tend to be the brands that are heavier in fleet.
Okay.
Maybe where the owner of the car, or the driver of the car, I should say, maybe doesn't have as much emotional attachment and care for the car.
Hmm.
So we definitely see a drop off there.
Yep.
But then for the brands where they're a little bit more traditional, more retail buyers, you're getting between that sort of 85 to 90%. But we used to see 90 to 95. It was generally quite high. So, but 5% when you're selling a lot of cars is a big
Sure.
number. So
Yeah.
that's why they're focused
Absolutely.
on it. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, that's still significantly higher than what we typically see in the U.S. I think overall we see about 55 to 60% coming back for
Yeah,
that first
right.
service visit. So
Okay.
yeah, yeah. Going back to that overall retention, what we're seeing, what most OEMs are seeing in the U.S. right now, and I'm assuming that you see the same thing in Australia, is that we see that drop off in service retention typically when the warranty expires. So that could be roughly 3-4 years in that area. But given that the number of vehicles that were sold during COVID had dropped pretty dramatically due to the chip shortage and that type of thing, it's kind of been a double whammy for many dealerships. And there's a lot of concern there at what are we going to do about service retention in 2026, 2027 as those vehicles get older, and we would typically lose too many of them at the start. Now we've just got a lower denominator, a lower base of vehicles to have to deal with. It sounds like it's
Yeah.
a similar situation in Australia.
It's similar, and I would go as far as saying that through that period when supply was short, new vehicle margins went up significantly as well
Yeah.
because the demand was spiking, but the
Yeah.
supply was obviously shrinking. And so dealers were making, margins on new vehicles that they were typically making in the back end of the business. And so what we've seen over the last 18 months or 2 years in our own data, in third-party data, and if you just go and talk to an owner of a dealership, they'll tell you as well, those new vehicle margins have shrunk back to where they were before. And so suddenly the pendulum has swung back and they're going, okay, what's all the opportunity that we're missing out on in after sales and service and parts and so on, and how can we get better? And it's been good for Infomedia in the sense that a lot of those solutions tend to lean into technology. How can we get more efficient? How can we provide a better customer experience? And how can I measure my staff to understand what are they doing well, but also what are the areas for improvement?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. So I did want to, in our previous discussions, Michael, we've talked about the kind of the Australian market and some of the service retention strategies that have been put in place by OEMs over a number of years. And talk to us a little bit about this concept of service activated roadside assistance. OEM roadside assistance in the U.S. Typically is bolted on and provided as 3, 4, 5 years, or sometimes even longer when a customer buys a vehicle, and it's almost as an additional benefit that's almost an afterthought as part of the vehicle sale. Not the case in Australia. So tell us a little bit about how Australia has really kind of strategically evolved to leverage roadside assistance as a service retention tool.
Yeah, I think I'll touch on my time at Jeep to sort of explain this. But before I do that, I think some important context is I've always thought about the genuine service, let's say, as a product. Yeah, it's got to be considered as a cohesive product. So it needs to have those clear features. It needs to have benefits, and what value is it giving to the customer? And I think one of the traps that you can fall into is that your genuine service offering ends up becoming a Frankenstein of all different types of things that ultimately don't sort of work cohesively together. So I think step one is, what does that genuine service brand or overall offering look like? And I think in terms of how that leans into Jeep and service activated roadside there, I was lucky enough that at the outset you said that I sort of launched Sarah. I think what I was lucky with is that they'd already put together a good service product. So they had, an extended warranty in there. They had 5 years cap price servicing, which we can touch on that as well. That's a very Australian specific servicing. But they had service activated roadside as well. But the execution relied really heavily on manual steps. Yeah, so across multiple points, from dealers, from the OEM, from third parties, they needed to do some manual steps. And so what that meant was that it just wasn't reality that those humans were consistently executing those manual steps. So the customer was the one that was sort of left short at times, right? And so we worked pretty hard with our suppliers. Infomedia was one of them, really to automate and sort of systemize large parts of that program, the service activated roadside. So humans only really needed to step in when something, let's say, fell outside of the parameters. So service activated roadside as a concept, how Jeep did it at least, was that when you purchased the car, you got 5 years of roadside as standard, regardless of how you service that vehicle. However, from the 6th year onwards, or I really should say after your 5th year, you needed to come in and complete a full standard scheduled service, and you were then entitled to another 12 months of roadside. And the way that was executed was essentially a much cheaper price, because we were buying, let's say the roadside with economies of scale for an entire network of customers that the dealer paid for, that much smaller price point. but the customer was getting a much higher value proposition if they went out and buyed roadside themselves. So customers could see the value. It didn't cost dealers too much, and it helped retain customers in the network. The other benefit of it was that if they were on that roadside program, when something went wrong out of warranty, they would get towed back to a Jeep dealership. And that enables that touch point to take place again, hopefully deliver a good experience, and again, build that trust. So yeah, it's definitely amazing for service retention, but also every brand that has it here also uses it to sell new cars. Cost of ownership in general, what am I going to get looked after is a question that most Australian consumers ask when they're looking to purchase a car. And so sales consultants are really well equipped to compare against our brand versus another and what those offerings look like. So yeah, very big retention play, very big for new cars, and every brand does it a little bit differently. So Jeep had 5 years plus one, plus one, plus one, whereas other brands, they only give you 1 year and you've got to come back for your first service to get the second. So yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Is there any data that you might be able to share with us that, and just from a rough perspective, perhaps, in terms of what the impact of that was on service retention and on the dealership's ability to keep that customer longer?
Yeah, I probably don't have data I can talk to off the top of my head, but I think as a general rule, and this is a little while ago now when we sort of did it, as a general rule, we leveraged it at Jeep for a win back component in particular, right? So we did, their program was unique in that you could miss a couple of services, not get your roadside, but if you had an 8-year-old vehicle and you came back and had a full scheduled service, you got the roadside included, right? So what I could say is there was a big focus on winning back vehicles that were sort of 3 to 7 years old that were lost to the network. And we did a lot of promotion and campaigns to that target audience with roadside as a key pillar of that, because of that value that they were getting, where the dealer network didn't need to discount the service. Jeep Australia then didn't need to rebate or do anything to make that more attractive. The hook, let's say, for the offer was the roadside program. So it won back a lot of customers. I wouldn't be able to give you the exact number or percentage, but it definitely worked. Put it that way.
Great. And what was the dealer's reaction to that strategy?
Yeah, I think they liked it. Again, I wasn't there when they sort of came up with the idea, but I believe that the National Dealer Council were the ones that suggested we need to have service activated roadside, because other brands had launched it in Australia. We have a lot of multi-franchise dealers in Australia. So they go, hey, it's working for brand A and brand B. You guys don't have it. We really think it would work. So it was actually driven by the Dealer Council. They saw the benefits of it, which made the rollout component easy. And I think let's say the automation of it, all of those manual steps that we took away, was probably a 6 to 8 week kind of teething process for dealers to understand, using accurate job codes and various things so that the system could identify that the service is taking place. But after that, it became quite seamless. And I believe they're still using it today, 7 years after I've left, and it seems to be working well. So
that's super. I also wanted to ask you if you could explain to our audience the concept of fixed service pricing, which I know is popular in Australia as well. So you could just briefly explain that for our listeners and what that means for the vehicle owner and for the dealership.
Yeah, so fixed price servicing, cap price servicing, assured pricing. There's lots of different, let's say, brand terms that have come up with it, but it's a very it's quite a standard part of the new vehicle proposition that automakers put in place in Australia. There's some caveats to this comment, but in principle, it just locks in the price of the first 3 or 5 years standard servicing, so that customers know exactly what they're going to pay for. So the day that they pick up the car, they know what the price of that service is going to be moving forward. So it really does drive retention. But it's also used a little bit like Sarah as a sales feature, where consultants can speak to it, in the competitive landscape and show our vehicle costs $500 less over 5 years to service. Yeah. I think the closest thing that you would have in the States is sort of prepaid maintenance plans. We actually
Yep.
have those as well, particularly with the premium brands, but cap price servicing or fixed price servicing is kind of like an optional, maintenance plan. The customer doesn't need a prepay, but they know what they're going to be up
Yep.
for that sort of first 3 or 5 year period.
Yeah. I think the concept is really an interesting one because some of those OEM prepaid programs that some of the OEMs offer here is that one of the issues has been, well, why doesn't 100% of our customers take advantage of this? It's free.
Yeah,
And that's and we can, there's a lot to go into there that we won't expand upon. But I was recently at an OEM conference where they put a slide up a little bit different, but basically it was about customers who purchase a prepaid package versus those get one for free, and the gap in retention between those two was significant. That showed that if the customer has to pay for it, they're much more likely to use it. And I think that the fixed service pricing concept is, it's subsidized by the OEM, but it's not free. It really does seem to hit the sweet spot to bring customers back in.
yeah. I mean, when I was at Fiat Chrysler, Alfa Romeo was in the brands that we had here, a bit more of a premium product, and we had
Mm-hmm.
maintenance plans for them. And I can tell you the exact same thing. When free service plans were offered, retention with that subset of customers versus those that paid for it was lower, significantly lower. So yeah, I think when customers have skin in the game, it's like human beings, right? It doesn't matter whether you're um, in dealerships or in some other industry. If you've put your skin in the game, you're gonna make sure that you get that value in return. Something for free, does it really have value? It's difficult. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, as we come to the close of our time together today, Mike, I'm just curious, what do you see looking forward as kind of the biggest opportunity for service retention in, say, the next 12 to 24 months?
Yeah, I'll give you a sort of an obvious one, maybe a less obvious one, and something a bit more speculative. But I think the first one is practical real AI in the service workshops.
Yeah.
That's going to become, I think, commonplace. We're going to see it helping technicians, helping advisors in operational ways to really automate things. I don't think AI in that space is at all hype. So, AI generated quotes, AI triaging customer concerns, AI predicting follow-up repairs, AI guiding advisors on how to, communicate to customers in a way that's going to be effective. I think the list goes on, and real things that can either make a lot of money or they can save a lot of time and save you that cost. So yeah, we've got a number of features that we're launching at the moment. We're working really quick on them for that reason. We think it's a very short term. I shouldn't say short term. It's in the short term that this is going to become commonplace, and I guess we want to be a part of that. I think the second, maybe less obvious one that I can see starting to take shape with a couple of automakers is a concept more of, I guess, service loyalty indexing, where it's not just the retention as a percentage, overall. It's trying to bake in different data points to understand the likelihood of a customer leaving or defecting and when they're going to occur, so that rather than looking at retention, which is essentially a lagging indicator, there's
Yeah.
almost this thing coming up going, okay, well, we think that Bill in a year's time is going to leave because he's meeting, these three levers or factors. So we need to put something in place now to lock him in for a little bit longer. I can definitely see that happening. And we see it in B2B sales, yeah. And it's a very common concept in other industries. It's just not in auto for whatever reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, and maybe the third one, and this is sort of the more speculative one, but subscription style service ecosystems or products. I'm surprised we haven't really seen it, seriously yet. There's cap price servicing, there's prepaid maintenance plans, there's all of that together. But I think, from a subscription of EVs or car sharing, we've seen it there, but why couldn't it be done for, a, a monthly fee that covers you for servicing for 5 years or for access to some accessories or whatever that might be? I think it's going to help lock customers into a longer term relationship. And like their Netflix account, it'll almost go unnoticed, so that when they need those tires fitted, it's like, okay, well, it's only X amount more today because it's almost feels like it's spent. So subscription models have been proven to work. That's why so many businesses have shifted to them, but we haven't really seen it in service offerings. So that's my speculative one. I think some people will attempt it. We'll see whether it works or not.
Yeah, absolutely. That's super. Well, thank you very much, Michael. I really appreciate your time today. If any of our listeners would like to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to do so?
You can find me on LinkedIn. Just search Michael Johnson. There'll probably be 100 of them, but you'll see my face. You'll see that I'm in Melbourne, Australia, working for Infomedia. So yeah, feel free to connect there. And in terms of Infomedia, infomedia.com.au would be a good place to go. Just visit our website. All of the content around products are there, and we've got a heap of experts on their particular product that people can speak to if they're interested.
Well, great. Well, Michael, thanks very much for being with us today. Really appreciate it, and we'll look forward to having you on again soon.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to Retention Roadmap, Navigating Service Success for New Car Dealerships. Subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts.